Now for global business updates, Rotus Odiri joins us. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Dr. Abati. Good morning, Vimbai. Good morning, Rufai. Actually, we're focusing on just Africa today. So much going on across the African continent. We can start, of course, with Mr. Faye, who has gone from, as the media is saying, from prison to presidency over in Senegal. It's a young man, what is he, 43, 44 years old. Here's a quote, I think, in his speech where he said he plans to fight corruption and he is willing, in fact, let me get the exact speech here. I commit myself to govern with humility, transparency, and to fight corruption at all levels. Senegal will remain a friendly, safe, and reliable ally to anyone who commits with us in virtuous, respectful, and mutually productive cooperation. So, of course, again, Mr. Basiru Dimao Faye. So, and you know, a lot has been said about 18 million or so Senegalese facing poverty. Inflation is pretty low in the country, about 2.2, 2.3%. They've spent a lot of money, though, on trying to boost infrastructure. So we'll have to see how things work out in the West African nation. I believe you have an interview coming up on that. We go, of course, to the monetary policy. There's a chart with Bloomberg Economics was talking to, did a survey where they looked at what the likely outcomes are going to be for Ghana, Nigeria, and South Africa. So if you see on your screen there, you should have Ghana at a hold, Nigeria at a hike, and South Africa at a hold. So they've got one right so far. If you look at Ghana's economic metrics, you'll see that Ghana maintained its monetary policy rates at 29%. But looking at the other numbers, the reference rate in Ghana, which is a computation using the policy rates, treasury bills, market conditions, it kind of skews towards policy rates though. The reference rate in Ghana is 31%, right? You can see that inflation has been decelerating. I think it was 23.2% in February, coming down year on year from 23.5 in January. And then you got TB rates and a number of other things. But Ghana has a positive real rates of return. They also made some adjustments to their cash reserve ratio. And what Dr. Ernest Addison, the governor of the Bank of Ghana, was explaining yesterday was that they want banks to lend more to the public. So if you take a look at the cash reserve ratio, you will see that if you have a higher loan deposit ratio of 55% and above, you have a lower cash reserve ratio. So basically, essentially what it says is that, and there's a quote we have from Dr. Ernest Addison where he said, we want banks to do what they are supposed to do, which is to lend to the public as opposed to holding paper. And when he says holding paper, he's referring to their very attractive bills, treasury bills, which are north of almost 30%. Again, I've made reference to the reference rate of 31% in Ghana. So banks are more likely to hold on to money market instruments as opposed to lending. So based on that chart, anywhere if you're above 55% loan deposit ratio, you'll get a lower cash reserve ratio. But if your loan to deposit ratio is much lower, the cash reserve ratio will be higher, meaning that the Bank of Ghana will sterilize funds at basically no interest rates, and that is supposed to incentivize banks to lend. We come to Nigeria. The big debate in Nigeria is, will there be a hold or will there be a hike? Dr. Abati yesterday was laying out the conditions for us, where Dr. Abati was talking about the FX inflows that have come in, the Naira, stabilizing just a bit is still, of course, on the high end, and the CBN wanting to possibly say, okay, should we take a wait and see. Here is Johnson Chukwu, Group Chief Executive Officer of Cowrie Asset Management. He was on the Arise Exchange yesterday with Bosun Omofaye. You can catch Arise Exchange 7 p.m. West African time, Monday through Friday. He echoed Dr. Abati yesterday, and he echoed the argument for a hold. Here's what he said.
I think it will be too soon for the central bank to further tighten. Remember that the last MPC meeting was just a month ago, and the full effect of that, the policy announcements are yet to be fully felt. As it stands today, you can't really say the economy has fully absorbed the implication of the 400 basis point increase in monetary policy rate and the 12.5% increase in cash reserve ratio. There's always what they call lag effect. And that means that some of the impact of these policies will begin to manifest in subsequent months. So I think it will be too early for the Monetary Policy Committee to tighten again just barely a month after they made an announcement. Remember that the practice was not for them to meet on a monthly basis. There was always a 2-month period, which was to allow for the effect of their policies to begin to permeate in the economy. So I think tightening further, just a month after they had increased it by 400 basis points and increased cash reserve ratio to 45%, may be too soon. And the most appropriate thing is to wait and weigh the impact of the policy pronouncement they made in February.
So, I mean, Johnson Chukwu, of course, is a brilliant man. He's been in the markets for years. So he makes a comprehensive argument there. But the argument for those who want to hike is that look at inflation. If you wait, if the CBN is to wait, or Monetary Policy Committee is to wait till the next meeting, what if inflation keeps galloping up? And then I mentioned the real rate of return in Ghana, which is positive. A reference rate of 31%. Inflation is at 23.2. In Nigeria, you've got the flip side. Inflation, headline inflation, over 30%. Your monetary policy rate is at 22. If they hold now and wait until another 1 or 2 inflation prints before the next MPC meeting, there is a likelihood that inflation keeps galloping upwards, and that spread between your MPR and inflation continues to widen, which would disincentivize the investors that have been bringing in foreign portfolio FX funds, FX inflows into the country as a result of liberalizing the exchange rates, giving you a more realistic rates, managed floating, whatever you want to call it, and also raising securities rates. So I'm saying it's going to be a hike. Maybe I said 200 or maybe 150. Again, the debate is open. We will see what happens at about 2 o'clock. It's the big guess. So I'm holding on to. Sorry, I jumped something. I want to go back to Ghana. Cocoa futures have actually climbed. I think there have been some supply disruptions with cocoa, but this is actually going to benefit Ghana. So at the beginning of the year, the May contracts for futures, again, you got forwards and futures. You make an agreement to settle the price of a commodity at a future date. They started about, I think it was at $4,200 per ton. As of yesterday, they rose to about 9,006, so a 125% jump. So that's going to benefit Ghana, benefit an Ivory Coast. But then we're going to see it probably, if you take a look at chocolate prices and other derivatives of cocoa, that means those prices are going to rise. So there's always two sides to the coin. Let's get back to the central bank. They put out a notice to BDCs. And they're selling FX to BDCs, but they've made a change. They've actually lowered the amount. They've tweaked what they're selling to BDCs. So basically, if you look at the notice that was sent out effective March 25th, they're selling now $10,000 to the BDCs. It was $20,000 prior. They've also adjusted the rates downwards. CBN is saying they will sell to BDCs at $1,250 or so. And they're saying that the BDCs, prior to that, it was $1,300 per dollar. They're now saying that the BDCs cannot sell by a spread of more than 1.5%. They increased the spread slightly. So if you do that calculation, 1.5 times that amount, you get about, I think it's like 18 naira spread at the max. So maximum, you can't sell more than 18 naira, right? How are they able to do this? This is an outcome of the CBN getting more firepower from what I've mentioned earlier. Liberalizing the exchange rates, letting investors giving a more realistic rate, the IMTOs, the net open positions on banks, the increase in, money market rates, T-bills, that FX inflow of between anywhere from $1.3 to $2 billion that have come in. They now have that firepower to actually use reserves to dictate to BDCs what should be. So whether or not the BDCs comply, that's another story. The central bank says that they will sanction any BDCs that do not comply. So we're going to see how the rates move. I think my parallel market now is about 1,004. The NAFEM rate's about 1,041 or so to that effect. So again, the big story though is what's going to happen with MPC. Finally, it's still Women's Heritage Month, in case anyone has forgotten. I spoke with the Managing Director and Chief Executive of FAAN, the Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria, the first female Chief Executive and Managing Director of FAAN. That's Mrs. Olubimi Oluwaseun Kuku. We talked about a wide range of issues. We'll bring you the rest of that interview on the Global Business Report. But just a couple excerpts here where she talked about accomplishments and challenges faced over the last 100 days. She said 100 days in office, and also acknowledging Women's Month. So here she is.
For us, there are a couple of things that we're looking at in terms of achievements. We've been able to open, what we call One It Right. One It Right is our international runway. We have 2 runways that serve our passengers in Lagos. We have the One It Left, which is typically for domestic passengers, and then we have the One It Right, which is for international landings. That runway had been closed since March of 2023. It was closed down for emergency repairs. It should have been shut down for 6 weeks. I did start in December, and that runway was still under construction. It actually posed quite a bit of challenges to a lot of our operators. So we had the airliners who were extremely concerned. It affected the routing of passengers in terms of, having to move them from one location to another. We sprung into action very quickly, of course, with the support of the Honorable Minister, as well as the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry, to make sure that we engaged the contractor, we were able to bring them back to site because they had already abandoned the project at that point.
I have to ask, it's Women's Heritage Month. It would be remiss of me not to ask you, as the first female chief executive and also managing director of FAAN, are you seeing more women in the aviation sector? What's that been like for you, coming up in this sector and being a leader and an inspiration for young girls who want to probably do what you're doing? How's that developed from your vantage point?
That's actually an interesting question, Rotus. So I looked at, on Women's Day, I actually spoke to my Director of Human Resources, and I wanted to have an idea of the number of, women that we had within the organization to understand the gender balance. At the mid-management level, we actually had about 55 to 60% women. At the senior management level, it was slightly less. I have challenged him to say that in the next couple of years, we actually want to get to at least 40% for the women as opposed to the men while we drive this significantly. But if you look at the aviation sector at large, yes, indeed, we are seeing a lot more women. We're seeing them as service providers, we're seeing pilots, we're seeing a lot of engineers who are women. So it's definitely an exciting time for the ladies. And, as you said, it's the Women's Heritage Month. And, the women are really taking, and they are being in the forefront.
Is that all right? By the way, climate change is real. That's our update.
Okay.
Done.
You just had to sneak that in there. But I support your point of view as regards the need for a hike, Rotus, because really, when you look at the level of inflation in Nigeria as we speak today, it's unprecedented, and it's still going to increase. And even if you keep your interest rates the way they are, you hold. On a best case scenario basis, based on the projections from the Economic Intelligence Finance team, it's the fact that probably if inflation is going to slow down and come to the barest low in a couple of years from now, it's going to be about 24% inflation. Your rates as we speak today will still be less than that best case scenario of inflation of Nigeria in the future. So I think the Economic Intelligence is saying, okay, year end, early next year, inflation, best case scenario is going to be about 24% inflation. Our rates, as we speak in the market, will still be lower than that level. And so when you look at that critically, we still need to raise rates. There's no how to be able to tackle this level of inflation that is unprecedented. It's a 28-year rise. It's back to the Abacha days, where you had interest rates close to 50% in this country. I was at a forum where Ibukun Awoshika was saying, in 93, 94, she took a loan at interest rate about 45%, a 1 million naira loan then. So that's where we are, that's where we are back to as we speak in this country. Another part I was really excited you talked about is the cocoa futures in Ghana. I would have thought that at a point in time in Nigeria, cocoa too can be able to help us shore up Forex. Our highest cocoa production level in the 70s was about 450 or 460,000 tons in the whole year. But we have plummeted so badly now that we're doing about 200 to 340,000 tons as we speak. There was a projection to be able to increase cocoa output to about 500,000 tons, but we have not done that as of 2024. I'm not sure we're producing that amount. Cocoa also used to be a big mainstay. So if we have not gotten the production of high, net worth goods to be able to show off our production and get forex in, can we at least double on things that we used to be known to us that did well for us? Cocoa built us Cocoa House in Ibadan, one of the biggest skyscrapers and the first in West Africa at that time. So let's look at that possibility. And for Senegal, I'm more than excited for Senegal. The people of Senegal prevailed. That economy needs a young, innovative leader that can marshal his country. And I hope we are looking and taking notes here in Nigeria. Like you said, inflation is quite low, but the problem is job creation in Senegal. So hopefully Faye can put all the things he has said to work. Congratulations, Senegal.
Right, very quickly to Ghana. I know yesterday I unpacked the South African monetary policy decisions, or the projection rather, that is most likely to hold. Looking at Ghana, some of the dynamics are very similar, which is that it is, we're going through stressful, distressing economic times, and it's an election year as well in Ghana at the end of the year. Now, the funny thing is Ghanaians have pulled up a lecture that the Vice President, Bawumia, who's the current presidential candidate for the ruling party, he did a lecture in 2014 saying restoring the value of the cedi. Of course, this was in the run-up to elections. Well, 10 years later, the cedi has declined from 3.6 to the dollar to 13.75 cedi to $1. So it's impossible to separate what's happening with the central bank and with monetary policy from the politics that's also playing out. The smartest thing to do is to hold. You don't want to rock the boat in an election year. Inflation has eased just a little bit, and I suppose the idea is to just try and stabilize, maintain some sense of stability until the election comes up in December. So, all eyes on that.
Okay, yesterday I said that given the hawkish stance of the Monetary Policy Committee of Nigeria in February, and some of the achievements that the CBN will seek to have made, that it looks like the MPC will remain hawkish, and that's what has happened. But the question remains whether increasing the monetary policy rate, would, stem headline index. That still remains to be seen. Now, let me talk about Senegal. It's a major turning point for Senegal. Africa's most stable democracy, no military coup in that country since independence in 1960. Bassirou Faye's emergence is a major triumph for the opposition. Nobody knew about Bassirou Faye, 1 year ago. In fact, he came out of prison 10 days, and then 10 days later, he's been declared the president. The youngest, 5th president of that country. And then, of course, now, when he's sworn in, he becomes the youngest president in the whole of Africa. He was born in 1980. He was 44 only yesterday. 19 candidates. At the end of the day, even Amadou Ba. If Amadou Ba had won, that would have been a confirmation of the status quo. But this is a major triumph for the opposition. It means that the people of Senegal have won change, and that's why they are celebrating. They've been able to achieve that change. And now, it's also a major triumph for Sonko. And let us not forget that Faye ran as an independent candidate, Pastef, having been, dissolved by Macky Sall's government last year. But what does he want to do? We're told that he's a left-wing Pan-Africanist. His hero is Sheikh Anta Diop. He says he's going to come up with a new currency. That's from the economic side of it. He thinks that the CFA, the CFA must go. That's one. 2, he wants to take another look at mining and hydrocarbon contracts. So there's going to be a lot of change in terms of existing government contracts. And 3, he says he's going to do something about unemployment and make sure that he creates opportunities for young people. So those are the economic highlights that he's talking about. But we'll see if he's the turnaround guy that Senegal needs, and whether or not his partnership with Ousmane Sonko, who is effectively his mentor, will remain, and that Senegal will move forward beyond this point. Maybe there are lessons also that the opposition in Nigeria can learn from what has happened in Senegal. Thank you.
But he's not the youngest because the three coup plotters, those presidents are really young. Assimi Goïta just born 1983.
No, those ones are military people. This is an elected person.
Okay, the youngest
The emphasis
elected.
is the youngest elected president. I'm not going to promote coupists on television.
Yeah.
So
I won't do that.
we'll unpack this when we discuss Senegal a little bit later on. Thank you so much, Rotis Odiri. Love the view there. Please do go somewhere where you can cool off.